Well, welcome. I'm glad that we're gathered again to continue our reading of Scripture in a chronological order. When we ended yesterday on the extreme downer of the defilement of Dinah and the equally evil revenge that was carried out by her brothers, Jacob's fear of retribution from those in the area leads to God's command that he move to the area of Bethel. It's interesting to note that when Jacob first is at Bethel, it's because he's fleeing his brother after having deceived him. Now he's in Bethel again, this time as a result of his son's deception of the Hivites at Shechem. As they prepare to go to Bethel, Jacob commands his family to rid themselves of their foreign gods. In Bethel, they're going to make an altar to God, to the God who answers in the day of distress. And Jacob wants to be sure that all of these other gods are set aside. God put fear into the Canaanites so that they would not attack Jacob as he travels to Bethel. And at Bethel, Jacob builds an altar to God as God had commanded. God appears to Jacob again and he blesses Jacob, once again renaming him from Jacob to Israel. God promises that a nation will come from him. God promises him that an assembly of nations will come from him. This, by the way, is new in the promises that God has been giving to the patriarchs, and it refers to the many nations or the Gentiles that will be drawn to Jesus. God promises Jacob that kings will descend from him, that God will give him the land that was promised to Abraham and Isaac, and that his descendants also will have this land. Again, Jacob set up a stone marker, as was his custom when God appeared to him, and he consecrated it with oil, and also this time with a drink offering. We're surprised to hear that Rachel is dying while giving birth to a second son because we hadn't been told that she had become pregnant again. This is the only child that Jacob ends up naming. He does name him different than the name that Rachel had given him, and Jacob calls him Benjamin. Rachel dies giving birth, and she's buried near Bethlehem. We read next a single verse that tells us that Reuben lay with Bilhah, which was Rachel's servant. Now, it's easy to slide by this single verse with all the other drama in the family going on, but this is a significant verse. Reuben is likely trying to lay claim to Jacob's place as family leader. We'll see that happen a number of other times on our way through Israel's history. That Leah's firstborn, Reuben, takes the maidservant of Rachel, just emphasizes again the divide in the family. Jacob does not appear to respond again, but Reuben does pay a price in the end. Jacob does remember this. He does not. Reuben ends up not receiving the double inheritance that the firstborn would normally receive. That inheritance instead goes to Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. And Reuben actually would not receive a blessing from Jacob on his deathbed, just a reminder of what he had done with Bilhah and the news that his tribe would not be a significant tribe in the people of Israel. So after a long delay, Jacob finally reunites with Isaac. Isaac dies at 180 years old, some 80 years after he thought he was going to die and wanted to bless Esau. Jacob and Esau together bury Isaac, which does indicate that Jacob and Esau are continue to be reconciled. Chapter 36 is bursting with information about Esau's descendants. We'll come across the Edomites again in future readings. Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, is greatly loved by Jacob. This causes great distress among the other sons. Jacob was not at all subtle about this favoritism, something that we see by, for example, this special tunic that he gives to Joseph, often referred to as the coat of many colors. And the siblings, well, they're no more subtle about their dislike for Joseph. They're not even able to speak to him peacefully. Moreover, as if this isn't all enough, Joseph has a dream. And in the dream that he shares with his family, there are 12 sheaves, and his sheaf, 12 sheaves of wheat. His sheaf stands up, and the other wheat sheaves bow down to him. Well, the brothers obviously pick up on the obvious implications of this right away, that they're going to be subject to him, and this does not please them at all. Joseph has another dream, and in this dream there are 11 stars that bow down to his star, and the sun and the moon also bow down to him. Now, even Jacob has trouble with this, as it implies that Jacob, is going to be subject to Joseph as well. But even though it bothers Jacob, and he speaks of that, Jacob does keep this in mind. I suspect quite curious as to what all of this means. At one point, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers as they're tending the flocks. They're quite a ways away, probably about 50 miles away. And the brothers are not where Jacob is initially told to expect them to be. Jacob inquires of a man in the area, and he sends him another 13 miles further to find the brothers. When the brothers see him coming, they rise up to kill him. But Reuben talks them out of it. He talks them into throwing them into a pit. Instead, Reuben being the oldest of all the brothers. And his idea is that he's going to come back later. He's going to rescue Joseph from the pit and send him back home. But a caravan comes by, and the other brothers take the opportunity to sell Joseph to some slave traders who are working their way to Egypt. A little bit later, when Reuben comes back, Joseph isn't there, and Reuben is really very, very upset. How can he go back without Joseph? Well, they end up, how can they go back to Jacob without Joseph? Well, what they end up doing is dipping Joseph's coat into blood to make it look like he'd been killed, and they take that to Jacob. Jacob assumes that Joseph had been killed by wild animals on the long journey, as the brothers expected that they would. And Jacob mourns. He mourns without ceasing. Actually, he expects to continue to mourn until the day that he dies. Meanwhile, the caravan takes Joseph to Egypt, sells him to Potiphar, who is an officer of Pharaoh. Potiphar is actually the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Once again, we see the shortcomings and the failures of God's people. We can also see God moving and working through them anyway. God is never mentioned in this particular chapter, but it's clear that it's He who is acting to guard and protect, even as He assures that His purposes are being accomplished, regardless of what His people are doing and how they are, while they're behaving in very sinful ways. May God be with you. Bless you now as you continue your readings. I pray that they are beneficial to you, and I look forward to gathering again with you as we continue on. May God be with you and bless you.